Mr. Speaker, thank you very much. I just want to firstly, through you, apologize to the chair for interrupting a process rather in the question time, but I just felt that Parliament must maintain decorum. Question time, short, sharp, precise, to the point. Matters that relate to debate be refrained to the best of our ability and be discussed in debate. And the matters that the member for Yellow raised are very important. They're in response to our economy and in response to a statement that the Treasurer made yesterday on the status of our economy, on job creation and everything else that relates to the health of our country's economy. And so it is prudent that we bring this matter up for debate in the next few minutes so that the country fully appreciates. Sometimes in a world of misinformation, especially fueled by politics, the ugly head of politics does appear in our society, in the social media, in commentaries, in the media proper. But correct information is important to assist our people, our country, our economy, to be encouraged that we are moving at the right place. The Treasurer must be commended. You can be any person running economy in good times. Anybody can run economy in good times. Our Treasurer must be commended. He steered our country's economy in 4 hard years, period, on record. I mentioned 4 hard years, Mr. Speaker, because when we took government in 2019, the economic fundamentals were so weak. It was eroded. The former Prime Minister knows very well what was the economy he passed over to my government. I was his finance minister, Mr. Speaker. The reason why I resigned was because of his appetite for unhealthy debt, unsustainable debt. He is least qualified to talk about managing the economy, Mr. Speaker. And I just give you one pointer. I reminded him already and I remind him again on this floor of Parliament. What is the rationale of going to a credit suisse commercial borrowing 2-year repayment at 8.8% in 2018? When you talk about the economy's liquidity drying up, in 2018 there was a clearest evidence that we were at a precipice. We were falling into an economic abyss that we could not step out from. And so, Mr. Speaker, when we talk with context to allow the economy to regrow, and Treasurer is in the jump seat at the moment. We give him full support. We give him full support to ensure that he runs the economy to bring our country to a balanced budget at the very earliest. We anticipate by 2027, and a 13-year roadmap fully established for the first time to bring our country out of the bondage of debt that we have carried for so long. And this debt precedes O'Neill's government, precedes Somalia government. These are part of our national debt profile that we've been carrying since 1975 when we started off when our economy was a 1 billion kina economy. And I just want to encourage this House, our national parliament, and our country. We are trying our absolute best in tough times. You only have to look at the statistics of our budget delivery. Our budget delivery is not all debt-driven budget. Our budget delivery, substantial majority is funded by internal revenue. On record, IRC is collecting much, much better today than they've ever collected in the past. In fact, at a higher level, last year IRC collected at around 13 billion kina. That's record. On average, before IRC was collecting below 10 billion kina. Customs, likewise, is collecting above 3 billion kina. On record, Customs has never collected above 3 billion kina. These are in tough times. Increasing efficiency by appointing good people. We're starting to see some better performance in our internal revenue sector. And IRC is doing very well. Customs is doing very well. We are not only assisted by the high oil price, we are assisted by the increased efficiency from within and our budget support that is carrying the economy, as well as, Mr. Deputy Speaker, some good news. We've seen increase in export from agriculture starting 2021. Mr. Speaker, I returned from East New Britain over the weekend. In East New Britain, away from oil and gas dependency, away from mining dependency, East New Britain is an economy that is now, or has been running on agriculture and forestry and sustainable forestry especially. Look at the 500 people now employed in a new vineyard plant that we commissioned in 2021. 2 years on, we have 500 new people employed in remote Lasul LLG in the mining part of the Gazelle electorate. So these are evidence of work happening in tough times going forward. The last 4 years, Mr. Deputy Speaker, our government, knowing, as we arrived in 2019, knowing the weak economic fundamentals we had, arriving into 2020 with a COVID-19 that arrived in PNG as well as globally, and a COVID-19 induced global economic shutdown, the effect of COVID-19 going on into 2021, and the election that was coming up in 2022, we had to be expansionary, but within a responsible budget approach. Treasurer has a clear roadmap before us. The result of the roadmap, assisted with very, very cheap concessional US dollar denominated borrowing, we were able to retire 2019 at an 18.956 billion kina expenditure. We retired 2020 at a 19.398 financial expenditure. We retired 2021 at a 20.131 billion financial expenditure. We retired 2022 at a 23.374 money expenditure plan, or money expenditure. Sum of all this, Mr. Deputy Speaker, over 81 billion kina was spent in our economy in the last 3 years, going 4 years. Now you ask me, what is the result of this spending? Well, our public servants are paid on time like never before. I speak as finance minister. There were days when, former finance minister, there were days when public servants were paid behind because Waigani public accounts had no liquidity. And the former prime minister knows that how he runs to his friends in central bank, asking for treasury bill and inscribed stock to be printed. We deliberately choose to move away from treasury bill and inscribed stock, going to cheaper US dollar denominated borrowings that had 0%, had long-term grace period, averaging 5-year grace period. This is our track record, the treasurer's track record in the last 5 years. Collecting debt financing as well as internal revenue raised financing on time, delivering an 81 billion kina in the last 3 years of expenditure in our country, or 4 years. Mr. Speaker, the net result is this. Our economy grew from 79.6 billion kina we took over from in 2018 to 113 billion kina World Bank, IMF has placed our figure on. Mr. Speaker, you ask me, what does the macro statistics deal with the everyday person? Our disbursements to our districts and our provinces. Over the last 4 years, we've given 4.4 billion kina to our districts and provinces. If nothing is happening on the ground, members of parliament, those who came in today, you ask the former members of parliament. Our people out there, if nothing is happening on the ground, go to Ombudsman, go to the finance department, go to the reporting department in DARD. But as far as national government is concerned, and for instance, speaking from Tari perspective, my district received 15 million kina each for the last 3 years. I have 5 contractors running work in my district. These contractors employ up to 200, 300, 400, or 500 persons each at any one time, depending on the scope of work. So, Mr. Speaker, when someone asks me how many jobs you've created, the DSIP, PSIP program, through directly or indirectly, has put over 10,000 people, not just in Port Moresby, where foreign workers were pushing wheelbarrow like it was in the last 8 years. But in all parts of our country, including opposition districts, we will feign up to give money to them. You ask all members of parliament. They're employed through the district program and the provincial program and employment programs that is running through the contractors, and especially local contractors who are beneficiary to government disbursements. Their work happening out there through the DSIP, PSIP program, nationwide with a 100% nationwide footprint. We have created over 10,000 jobs directly or indirectly. I come to bills at the Works Department. We have today over 274 road contractors running at the Works Department. Through consistent funding of this Works Department, including retiring over 2 billion kina worth of contract the O'Neill government gave, never funded. Over 2 billion kina on record. Ask Works Secretary, he will confirm this. In fact, he came out to media already. We've delivered and retired outstanding contracts valued over 2 billion kina, and including today over 4 billion kina worth of contract that is running. These contractors, 274 of them, are employing Papua New Guineans. Because, Mr. Speaker, our government, Mr. Acting Speaker, our government choose to engage more local contractors, SME-type contractors, than the previous government that was very, very friendly to contractors from outside coming in to work in our country. Through contracts at Works Department and other state-issued contracts, over 10,000 other jobs were created as a medium-term or immediate and medium-term stopgap approach to keeping our people engaged and employed, our economy lubricated with kinas going through pay packets, and our people out there engaged in our economy. Mr. Speaker, not only this, for the first time, our generation of leaders on this side have invested money in SME programs. Mr. Speaker, on record, leadership since 2020 was the first leadership team that invested money in SME program. Someone has to go down to BSP, someone has to go down to NDB, and they will give you indications of hundreds of Papua New Guinean SMEs borrowing cheap concessional funds at 6% to ensure that they have startup or their business is supported. So SME funded, we're putting. These SME businesses would be directly or indirectly creating employment out there in the market. To advance the cause of SME, and especially our focus on agriculture and downstream processing in our country, we put money to support freight subsidy. We put money for price support. And to add to this round of focus, or area of focus, we put money this year for state equity and additional land acquisition to support businesses in our country. Mr. Speaker, our government, knowing very well where we are, led by the Treasurer, has made clear investment choices to diversify away from total reliance on oil and gas and mining, and to move into other aspects of our economy we feel can have a greater catchment of people and bring majority of our people into economic involvement, not just today, but more importantly, going forward into the future. Our focus on downstream processing remains #1 area. You may not know that it yet, members of parliament, especially the member for Yalu Pangia, but things are turning around. I point to you all my trip to Lasul, remote Lasul. Who would have given them a fair chance? None. Who would have given them a fair chance? Aren't they not Papua New Guineans? The Binings? They look out there in the bush forever. The Honorable Jalta Wong and myself arrived in 2021. Today, 500 Binings employed for the first time. And this is the story that we'd like to move, and I'd like to commend governors and members of parliament who are working with us to advocate and move quick time, big time into forestry downstream, agriculture downstream, fisheries downstream. We've invested 100 million kina into a program for resuscitation of PMIZ to ensure that the fishery sector also is lifted up and processing fish catchment in our country These have been in our government focus, Mr. Deputy Speaker, Acting Speaker, and we will not deviate from this course. This focus area will create tens and thousands of jobs directly and the spin-offs beneficiaries indirectly going forward. Mr. Speaker, the treasurer is at work. And I just want to conclude by pointing to some few commentaries lately. Business Advantage, the book that is published not by the Marape government, but our business community recently in the publication, has made few interesting observations, and I'd like every leader here to pick a copy of these observations. They did indicate to the challenges of operating business in our country. I do admit there are challenges in our country, and we are mindful of this, and we will work with the Manufacturer Council, the Business Council, to ensure the challenges are addressed. The challenge, the hardest one, they said, was the Forex access. Forex access. Mr. Speaker, Forex access was still a problem in 2018, still a problem in 2017, still a problem in 2016, when the economy was supposedly should have been traveling through good times, when LNG returns was to have hit our economy and made big impact. Yet we choose to be hostile to our people by very, very unworthy investments in the 2014-15 years that we were in government. Today, the business community places Forex as the #1 challenge, and we have worked to retire this challenge. Central Bank is now putting $100 million to the market every month to ensure the business community have access to Forex. This was from the far cry from what was a $3 or $30 million threshold that Central Bank had previously. Our treasurer has brought a reform to ensure Central Bank is a little bit liberated without compromising the independence and prudence and their fiduciary responsibility. Central Bank today reports to a board, not just the Central Bank governor doing things with our Prime Minister at Paddy's Bar or at Bacchus Bar. That was the past. I got to admit, that was the past. I mean, you know, I've been there on the side witnessing this conversation.
We have a point of order.
I mean,
Member for
Prime Minister to try and put into question integrity of professionals, Papua New Guinean professionals. These are career bankers, you know. You should be proud of their achievements. Not coming to this because you have a privilege mocking them. These are Papua New Guineans struggling out there, and they need a serious answer from you. Clear policies and programs from you. Why can't you man up and do it after 4 years? This is a matter that is of #1 concern in this country, unemployment.
Honourable Member.
Forex. I'm just replying to him. He has to be, he's the Prime Minister of our country.
Honourable Member.
He has to be serious about what he's doing.
Honourable Member, I can learn that you are trying to debate what the PM is saying. We are going through debate. If you want, I can allow you to make your debate. You have asked a very important question related to that, and that matter is now brought forward. And I will allow you to debate on this, so I will let the Prime Minister to
All right,
continue on statement.
Mr. Speaker, Mr. Acting Speaker, point spoken, point taken, point responded. Mr. Speaker, let me say, in that Business Advantage 100 CEOs response and surveys, they've made some interesting findings. #1, business challenge today is the Forex issue. Government has responded. Today, we got $100 million on the market, $100 million on the market every year. And Mr. Speaker, every month, sorry. Mr. Acting Speaker, it has never been a Forex issue. I stand here today, I stand to be corrected on the records of past Treasurer, past Central Bank records, and past government records. The average of Forex reserve under Mr. O'Neill has always been at 6 to 7 billion kina in Forex. The average of Grand Chief Sir Michael Thomas Somare was around 8 to 9 billion when NA was in office. Today, in 3 hard years, we've now gone past the 14 billion kina threshold. We have 11 months of cover. It has never been a fiscal policy issue. It has always been monetary policy and the way central bank was operated. We've unbundled this. It has taken some effort, but we've unbundled this carefully so that the market has the forex they require. Mr. Speaker, so to the business community, we are mindful of what you need to do, and I want to encourage all our business community, assist us, partner us, work in the downstream processing focus. We will come to you, all agriculture companies in our country. We'll come to you, all the forestry companies in our country. We'll come to you, all the fisheries companies in our country. First preference and priority will come to you, all who operate and do business in our country. Before we go elsewhere, partners in the downstream processing space, this is a core signature policy that differentiates between me and Mr. O'Neill and others of past. Mr. Speaker, we can no longer just depend on the hype and boom and bust cycle of the oil and gas and mining project. We must move seriously into downstreaming of our resources. That is why we got Minister Maru and the other 3 or 4 ministers in agriculture sector working into that space. Forestry and fisheries are working there. Mr. Speaker, those areas will create more sustainable jobs for us. And I want to encourage the business community. You have spoken, we are listening to you. Partner us in this space as we work together for the long-term sustenance of our country. I want to quote from a Westpac senior economist.
Honorable Prime Minister, I'll interrupt you. Your 20 minutes of debate has lapsed. I'll allow you another 2 minutes to.
All right. I just quickly want to quote from. Thank you, Mr. Acting Speaker. I want to quote from a senior Westpac economist in the same report. He says, "Profit, investment, and recruitment expectations have improved. Profit, investment, and recruitment expectations have improved, with recruitment sentiment at a record high." This is from Westpac, not from James Marape. High as 84.6% from 56.8% in 2022. Mr. Speaker, we are not imbeciles running this country. We've learned from the mistakes of past. We're diversifying economy. We're empowering all parts of our country. We're working, and Papua LNG FEED was signed. Within next year, FID will be announced. 10,000 jobs will be created. But we want to bring these 10,000 jobs into our country. That's why Kumul Petroleum and the Education Department is working with Total to train more Papua New Guineans to work in the space. We've sequenced Penang LNG back-to-back from Papua. Pogra already employed 1,000 people preparing to reopen the mine. When it's reopened, 3,000 workers will be employed, but in better terms for our country and not the terms that we were living with for the past 30 years. Our big projects will be running, but Mr. Speaker, our government remains focused in the downstream of our renewable resources. Don't listen to negative naysayers in the media and in the opposition, especially the former past. I will take good advice from the opposition leader. He has no input to our country thus far from government. He is a credible critic in the opposition. But I will not take advice from a prime minister who had the opportunity to construct this country, but ran this country for himself. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.